Hi, I'm Maria Scrivon and this is Toby. And I'm at home right now doing a lot of drawing, and I know everybody else is stuck at home right now, so I thought it'd be fun to put some videos online. Toby suggested I start drawing him because he is the inspiration for a character in my book named Treat. And the reason why is because he won't come when I call him, but if I say treat, he perks right up, right? Treat, I know. Well, we'll get one later. We'll get one after. Anyway, so I'm going to do some drawing. So even when I'm doing watercolor, I like to start out with a pencil sketch first. I don't like to draw on the watercolor paper because I like to keep it really clean, because when you erase watercolor paper, you sometimes lose a little bit of the sizing that's on the paper. So I usually start with pencil sketches, and then I can work out everything that I'm going to do in the pencil sketch. And then when I move it to the watercolor, I get a nice clean line and can then fill it in. So this is the important part, the tail, to show he's happy, because Treat's always happy. Well, as long as he has treats, he is. So I'm gonna do a quick pencil sketch just to show you how it works. And Treat always has his tennis ball. So the next step is I put it on my light box here, and this is probably going to get really crazy with the video, but I take a piece of watercolor paper and put it over. I tape it on to the drawing. And there it is. So I have the light box so I can just see enough of it to ink, and I love fountain pens. And I don't use the ink as, the pencil as a tight, super tight guide. I kind of like it as a loose guide because I think it's fun to be a little spontaneous with inking. So I'm kind of just using it as a place to start. But I want the freedom to kind of play with my inking. And again, this is the important part, the happy tail. Oh, and the other important part, tennis ball. I'm just gonna put in a little bit of grass just to kind of show that it's there, but I'm gonna do a lot of that with the color. And I love bright colors and I love watercolor. So my line work is pretty simple, and I do a lot of the other part in watercolor. So a big thing to learn is to let it dry, and I've used hair dryers on it. I've made the mistake before of being impatient, and what happens then is the ink smudges. The other big lesson I've learned is I have two things on my desk at all times: a cup of tea, cup of water. Don't put your paintbrush in the tea, and don't drink your paint water. Just like we're on a cooking show or something, I already hit this with a hair dryer so it would dry, like baking it in the oven. They do that trick where they have the cookies all baked, but then they pull them out like it took 1 second. Okay, so then the other thing I do is I tape it to a board, because watercolor, it has a lot of water, so the paper will warp. And this is heavy paper that won't warp so much, but if I tape it down, then I don't have to worry about it warping. Now I'm going to go to the super fun part and do the color. So let's see if I can get my palettes in the camera here. I have tons and tons of brushes, all different sizes. And another important thing I learned is to keep the water that you wash your brushes in, which I keep in this little jelly jar here, super clean. And the other thing that's really important that I always have is a paper towel to wipe the paint off. And one other thing that I have that's super fun is a scratch pad where I clean my brush off on it. And at the end, so I have one here that looks like this, but they end up becoming their own pieces of artwork just by cleaning your brush on it. So I'm going to start by painting him in. And that's another lesson I learned along the way. Each color, they will run into each other if you don't let each one dry. And sometimes that's a really fun thing to happen. It's one of the things I love about watercolor. It kind of takes on a life of its own. But sometimes I don't want that to happen. So if that is the case, I let each part dry before moving on to the next part. My whole graphic novel series, Not Enough and Forget Me Not, were all done by hand in watercolor in the same way that I showed you before. I did a pencil. Well, first I wrote a first draft. Then when we finalized the art, I did a pencil drawing and then a tight pencil, and then inked it, and then went in and colored it. And color is super fun with watercolor because you can mix things and make just every color possible. I just did the whole bake the cake in the oven trick again and got a hair dryer, which isn't that much fun to listen to on video, so I could speed up the drying process so I can go in and do the grass underneath him. And sometimes I mix the color on a palette, and sometimes I just mix it right here on my mixing pad. And what's fun about watercolor too, you can sort of finesse it, and if you have a little smudge, if you work it a little bit, you can sort of even it out, and sometimes you can even pick it up with a paper towel. That's why I always have a paper towel, because I have a brush in one hand and a paper towel in the other, just because I never know when I want to pick up a blop, which is the technical term. A really fun thing too with watercolor that you can do, if you put water down first and then water on top of it, it kind of does some neat things of its own. So I'm going to show you what that looks like with a little bit of sky behind Treat here. So if I just put paint right where the sky is, and here's what I mean about these watercolor scratch pads, they're super fun. They just kind of take on a life of their own. Oops, got a little green in there. So when I put, if everything's wet first and then I put paint on it, it kind of makes these blooms, which are really fun, and does its own thing here. I also love watercolor too, because it's really loose and it's not super precise, and it has a lot of energy to it because of that. Here's a little smudge I want to get rid of, so I can sort of finesse it a little with the end of the brush and take it out. And you can also use a paper towel, oops, you can also use a paper towel to pick up color, which is kind of cool if you want to have like a little pattern going on in the background. So I guess all he really needs now is his collar. And I can add some shadows. and a little blob on his nose. And that's Treat.